Your cat was there at breakfast. By evening, gone. You checked the usual spots: under the bed, behind the washing machine, on top of the wardrobe. Nothing. You told yourself they would be back by morning. They weren't. 2 days passed, maybe 3. Then, without ceremony, they walked through the door looking completely unbothered, sat down in the middle of the kitchen, and waited for dinner. Most owners file this away as one of those things cats do. Mysterious, unknowable, just their nature. But there is a body of research on exactly this behavior. What drives it, what the cat is experiencing during those absent days, and what the disappearance actually reveals about your relationship with your pet. Before this is over, there is one finding in that research that most owners push back on when they first hear it. It reframes what the disappearance means for the bond between you. It comes at the end, and it changes the whole picture. Start with the first assumption most owners make. When the cat does not come home, fear arrives quickly. Something has gone wrong. The cat is lost, injured, trapped somewhere it cannot get out of. That fear is understandable, and it causes owners to misread the behavior entirely, mapping a crisis onto what is, for most cats, a deliberate and purposeful absence. A University of Illinois study using radio telemetry tracked 42 owned and unowned free-roaming cats over 2 years. The findings separated immediately along one line. Unowned cats ranged dramatically. The largest recorded home range exceeded 1,300 acres. The owned cats stayed much closer. Their mean home range came in under 5 acres, but even those pet cats were moving through neighboring yards and stretches of territory their owners had never seen, navigating a geography that was entirely invisible to the people who fed them every day. The absent cat was not lost. It knew exactly where it was. That's not an animal that wandered too far. That's an animal executing a choice. It's worth noting here that intact cats range substantially farther than neutered ones. The hormonal component of territorial drive is real and measurable, and it accounts for some of the variation owners notice between individual cats. But even neutered cats range. The drive is reduced, not removed, which raises the obvious next question. The cat knew where it was. But what was it actually doing? Owners tend to picture their cat as a homebody who occasionally slips outside and drifts. The reality of how cats organize their outdoor lives is almost entirely invisible to the people who share a house with them. The Illinois telemetry study established that even pet cats were operating within consistent home ranges, not wandering at random, but returning repeatedly to the same geography their owners never knew existed. The University of Georgia's Kitty Cam project in 2012 placed animal-borne cameras on 55 owned cats and recorded their behavior continuously. What those cameras documented was purposeful movement, cats assessing risk, navigating infrastructure, engaging consistently with specific features of their environment across the range. The absence had direction. Your cat has a spatial life with its own logic, one that requires physical presence to sustain, and it has been there, invisible to you, the entire time. This is not a domestic quirk. It is inherited behavior from a solitary predator lineage, in which territory is the direct precondition for access to resources, for safety, for everything the animal depends on. The house cat carries that architecture, whether it ever needs it for survival or not. The drive did not disappear when the food bowl arrived. What activates the departure is not random either. The ethological literature on feline behavior, anchored by Paul Lyhausen's foundational work published in 1979, documents specific categories of trigger for intensified ranging: the scent of an unfamiliar cat at the range boundary, shifts in prey animal activity patterns, and seasonal hormonal changes, with the hormonal component substantially reduced in neutered animals. The departure looks impulsive from the outside. From inside the cat's nervous system, it is a response to real, specific information. Something changed in the environment. A signal fired. The cat responded. That is not an animal being unpredictable. That is a surveillance system running exactly as it was built to run. Once the departure is understood as a triggered response, rather than a random event, the next question is what the cat is actually experiencing during those absent days. Most owners imagine the worst. The cat cold, disoriented, possibly frightened. The ethological record points somewhere else entirely. Liehausen's work, still the most thorough behavioral account of the domestic cat produced in the 20th century, described in close detail the internal state of cats engaged in active predatory and territorial behavior. What he documented is a system running at full engagement, every sensory input being processed with a precision that domestic life rarely demands. The drive to hunt, to patrol, to move through and interpret a complete sensory landscape, these are not optional features of feline behavior. They are the architecture. When those drives are running, the animal is doing what it was built to do at a level of intensity that a warm house and a full bowl simply do not call for. The cat you are worried about is not the cat that is struggling. It is the cat that is, in a specific biological sense, most completely itself. So what brings them back? The easy answer is hunger. The cat ran out of resources and came home. That reading captures part of the mechanism, but misses its precision. Research reviewed in Irene Rocklitz's welfare analysis of domestic cats establishes that extended ranging carries a cumulative physiological cost. Caloric expenditure, thermoregulatory demand, and the sustained alertness that maintaining an active boundary requires. The home base offers predictable replenishment, thermal stability, and a reduction in vigilance demand that the open range cannot provide. The return is a physiological reset. The cat's body signals that reserves are depleted, and the resource site needs to be used. Think about what that means. At the moment of return, the cat is following a biological instruction. The drive that sent it out has been satisfied. The systems that sustain ranging have been drawn down. Home is where those systems recover. At this stage, the return is not yet about you. It is the body doing what it was designed to do. But not all disappearances follow the same pattern, and this distinction matters more than most owners realize. Veterinary behaviorists studying stress responses in domestic cats have documented that chronic environmental stressors, unresolved conflict with another animal in the home, unpredictable human behavior, persistent territorial instability, can produce behavioral withdrawal and avoidance as a recorded response. In these cases, the cat is not patrolling. It is retreating. The departure looks identical from the outside. The internal driver is entirely different. The return is how you tell them apart. A cat coming back from voluntary territorial ranging typically resumes normal affiliative behavior within hours, seeking proximity, settling into familiar locations, returning to established routines. A cat returning from stress-driven avoidance more often shows continued vigilance, reduced appetite, an altered sleep location, sustained withdrawal, or redeparture within a short window. Think about what that means. The hours after your cat walks back through the door are not the end of the episode. They are the most informative part of it. You are not simply waiting for things to return to normal. You are receiving information if you know how to read it. Which brings us to the finding that was promised at the start. The one most owners resist. In 2019, Kristen Vitale and colleagues at Oregon State University published a study in Current Biology applying the strange situation test to cats. The same attachment framework developmental psychologists use to measure the bond between human infants and their caregivers. The procedure is designed to detect a specific pattern. Whether an individual uses the attachment figure as a psychological reference point from which exploration becomes possible. 65.8% of adult cats tested showed secure attachment to their owners. The implication for ranging behavior follows directly from what secure attachment means. A securely attached individual has a stable internal reference, a base that makes the surrounding environment feel navigable rather than threatening. The security of the bond is precisely what enables departure. Attachment theory predicts the opposite for insecurely attached individuals. Heightened vigilance, a reduced capacity to treat the surrounding environment as navigable, less freedom of movement away from the caregiver. The confidence to disappear for 3 days is not evidence of indifference to the bond. In a securely attached animal, it may be the clearest behavioral expression of how solid the relationship actually is. The cat that leaves is not the cat that has checked out. It may be the cat with the most to come back to. That's not a cat that doesn't care about coming home. That's a cat that was secure enough to leave. Every disappearance and every return are 2 parts of the same statement. The cat left because it could. Because something in its environment it was built to respond to called it out. And because the bond at home was secure enough to make the open range feel navigable. It came back because of what is here. Both of those facts belong to the same relationship. The cat has been demonstrating it, in the only language available to them, every single time they walk back through the door and settle without ceremony into the middle of the kitchen floor. If you want to understand what your cat is doing when they fix you with that long, unblinking stare, the one with no obvious trigger and no clear end, the science behind it is more deliberate than most owners ever expect. And that's the next video.